grandson.
All right, thank you so much for coming to RJ Julia tonight. My name is Joan Mia, I'm one of the event hosts, and I'm honored to welcome Makenna Held here today. Who's going to talk to us about her amazing new cookbook, mostly French, recipes from a kitchen in Provence. And that kitchen that she's talking about just happens to be La Peach, Julia Child's home, former home in the south of France. Makenna bought Julia Child's summer house in 2016 without having seen it. And she now operates the Courageous Cooking School. Makenna shares her alma mater with Julia Child as they both graduated from Smith College. This beautiful cookbook brings us to the south of France, sharing 150 recipes, and it is a love letter to the food and the place. Welcome, Makenna.
Thank you. Do I need a mic? Are you okay? Sweet. I will save myself from the mic then. Mics make me nervous. Talking to y'all doesn't make me nervous, but something about microphones make me nervous, so I prefer not to. Well, thank you so much for coming. This is like how I sell books because I am not an influencer. I do not post on social media regularly, and so this is kind of the only way for me to reach an audience. So thank you for being that audience, for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I end up with La Peach, because that's the first question everybody asks. Well, actually, it's the second question. The first question is, what is a recipe-free cooking teacher doing writing a recipe book? So I will answer that first, and then I'll tell you the story about how I bought the house, and then I'll open it up to questions. So, let's start with recipe-free cooking. I think there is this belief system around cooking that if you are recipe-free or teaching recipe-free, you're somehow anti-recipe. There's something about how Americans conceptualize a blank free as suddenly anti that thing, right? And I will tell you wholeheartedly, I am not anti-recipes. I don't believe that recipes are a problem. I once got dinged by a food writer. It was the only piece of journalism that came out about my television show that was on HBO Max called La Peach Cooking in France. And it was this like big takedown about how recipes matter. And recipes are important, and how dare her throw recipes under the bus. And I'm sitting here going, yes, when you're learning how to cook Korean food, you probably want a recipe. That's not the point here. My point was more, and my website had this very bold statement on it. It said recipes erode sovereignty. It didn't say remove self-actualization. It didn't say remove your ability to cook. It didn't say remove anything. It said erode, meaning your sovereignty is slightly shrunken when you're following a recipe. That's it. And it was a concept more about life in general, like this notions of 25 habits of highly effective people, right? It's the 7 habits, but it's actually like 175 broken down into 7 categories, right? So it was more of a philosophical underpinning about how we as humans have a tendency to hand over our sovereignty writ large to people. We hand them over to influencers to tell us what skincare to buy. We hand them over to every single recipe book because we don't know what our taste buds like. And you probably know better than you think you do. And ultimately, too, it's just a different way to teach cooking. And it came from this deep necessity, not from this like place of like wonderment. It was, I bought Julia Child's house sight unseen. I can't cook from Mastering the Art of French Cooking because that is the epitome of Coles to Newcastle. I am taking a 1960s cookbook written for an American audience, for an American food system from the 60s, which has changed just a little bit. And someone always says, oh, food systems don't change that much. And I was like, you remember when Whole Foods got bought by Amazon? Ooh, the entire food system built on local food in local communities was flipped on its head overnight. So I couldn't teach from those cookbooks. Teaching from Simone Beck's cookbooks are lovely little cookbooks, but they had a deal with Mastering the Art of French Cooking that anything was in volume 1 and 2 couldn't be rewritten by Simone in her books. So by the time you get to her recipes, oh goodness, fish souffle with lettuce puree. And there's a great recipe. When I say great, I mean, oh dear recipe. That's turkey fingers in a green peppercorn sauce. And the first instruction is cut the turkey into finger-like shapes. Also, that's not what I think about when I think of a turkey finger, right? No, we hope that they're a little larger and not so finger-like. So I kind of had a necessity. At the time, I was not a recipe developer. I hadn't gone to culinary school yet. It was very much this like, I'm buying Julia Child's house sight unseen to open a business because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Small child. That was 10 years ago. 10 years is a long time to be doing this now, but I've loved every minute of it. So ultimately for me, it was out of necessity, and it became very clear it was actually a really interesting way to teach cooking. But so what is a recipe-free cooking teacher doing writing a cookbook? That's like asking a mathematician who knows how to do calculus and trigonometry why they use both. They're both important skill sets, and to be fluent in cooking, you need to be able to read a recipe well and follow it well, and also be able to create your own dishes. Full stop, that's my belief. So that is what me writing a cookbook has done. And I am not the only person who is deeply involved in this book. I run a company called Recipe Kick in addition to my work at La Peach. And Recipe Kick is about teaching people how to cook better, both with and without recipes. So all of my instructors had tested and edited the recipes. Some of them were written with them because I am not a baker. I can come up with brilliant ideas for baked goods, but how to actually execute that into the perfect olive oil cake? Bakers for that. And so my two of my employees actually co-wrote a couple of recipes with me in the baking section. So that's kind of how I ended up with a cookbook. Also, when someone says, hey, you want to write a cookbook? You don't go, nah. You say, why not? It's COVID. Let's get started. So that's kind of how I ended up here. In terms of how I ended up with the house, well, long ago in a galaxy far, far away, not that far, in Northampton, Massachusetts, I was a Smithy. I went to Smith College, same college as Julia Child. I was actually just there yesterday. I was there watching my professor. It was just luck. I had no idea this was happening. But my advisor retired this year, and his last class was yesterday. And I got to sit in on it, which was like so lovely. And what was so fun, it was a co-taught class with my other advisor. And they've been teaching this once a year. As long as Jay Garfield is on campus, they've taught this once a year. And it's called The Meaning of Life. And it's like an intro to philosophy and religion. And I was in the first class that Andy and Jay taught together. And I just happened to show up to their office hours and sit in on our last class. So I got very lucky yesterday. And I'm very thrilled about that because it was a good reminder of why I do what I do. Like sit there and hear them talk about the same stuff I was learning 20 plus years ago. It was like, oh, that's how I got here. You all, it's your fault. It is your fault I am who I am. But because I went to Smith, I was on this Facebook group for Smith alums, right? Like most of us who went to Smith are. And this lovely little article came out on November 13th, 2015 called The House That Julia Built. And there was this beautiful photo of a leaf-strewn terrace. No one thought to leaf blow it off before they put these beautiful photos in the New York Times. It worked for me, it didn't matter. And it had these little heart-shaped cutouts in the shutters. And there was this beautiful window with these heart cutouts in the shutters with this like red ivy that was slowly falling off. And I was like, oh, I want to go to there. Tired of that. I just want to do that. And that led me down a very quick rabbit hole of making a phone call and learning very quickly that it had already sold. So much to my chagrin, I hang up the phone and I go, oh darn, that's too bad. And before we hung up, he said, but there is a 10-day cooling period and it's only been sold for 5. So call me back in a few days if you just to check. I didn't have to call back because does anybody know what happened on November 13th, 2015? Yes. A not so kind thing happened in Paris, France that day. The Bataclan attacks. So the largest shooting in French history. And I was driving down, I was living at the time, I was a ski instructor. I was driving down the mountain from Vail to go to Boulder to see my family who lived in Boulder. And I was listening to NPR and it's like, breaking news, shooting in Paris. And I went, oh, that's horrible. I wonder if the house will go back on the market. And then I just was like, no, it's shooting, bad, listen, okay. And I'm just driving. And lo and behold, it did. Because it was an American who had bought the house for he and his daughter to kind of spend time in because she lived in Paris. And she decided that after the Bataclan attacks that Paris was too dangerous. So she decided to leave. And so, I went, me, please. And there were actually 3 other people in front of me. They slowly, 1, 2, 3, fell off. And I put a turkey in the oven on Thanksgiving that year, got it in the oven at like 4 o'clock in the morning, got on the phone with the real estate agents and lawyers and some bankers. And a few hours later, We had bought a plane ticket to send, not me, because I had ski instructor training that week, but an investor to go check out the house, hence why I never saw it before I moved to France. So that is how I ended up with the house. And that was it back in a time, in the days of yore, it feels like now, almost 10 years ago, where you could still get a mortgage pretty easily in France as an American. It wasn't that hard, it wasn't that complex. But they had really good terms, it turns out. So that's kind of how I ended up there. What questions do you have for me? Go ahead.
Did you speak French when you?
Oh, thank God, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I don't recommend moving to France if you don't speak French. I will tell you, my husband, who's lived there for 8 years, really struggles. He is not a natural language learner. I wish it all kind of happened fast. So I wish he had spent more time learning on this side before, like really intensely. But yes, I was very grateful to have a very incredible French instructor in middle school, who won lots of awards all the time for good teaching. So I was a very good French speaker. I was also an exchange student in high school for a summer. I talk about my host mother in the book, because in a lot of ways she taught me how to cook. Her name was Veronique. Is Veronique, she's still alive. Yes.
Where in Provence are you?
So I'm in France. Nice. Cannes, Grasse, La Peach. Like kind of equidistance between Cannes, Nice, and Grasse. And Grasse is the perfume capital of the world, ostensibly. That's what UNESCO says. It's a World Heritage Site for perfume. And I'm actually opening a restaurant there on August 1st, called Detour, with my kind of compatriot partner in crime, Kendall Lane, who is on the show with me. If you haven't seen the show, it's a lovely little show. It's very, very easy to watch, and it's great with your Sunday morning coffee, and it's on Max, Hulu, Amazon, it's kind of everywhere.
Very good.
And it follows the Courageous Cooking School and like how we instruct and teach.
What's the name of the show?
La Pichoun Cooking in France. Let me just tell you, as a marketer and someone who has been in business for a long time and was a business professor, I told them, don't do that. They did not listen. But if you look up, if you're on Max, you can look up Cooking in France. It's pretty easy to find, or if you're on my website, or a little link to the show. But yeah, it's 7 episodes. It's a sweet little kind of expose of like how we teach, how our lives kind of look like behind the scenes. But of course, it's made for television, so it's not exactly, it makes us look really ridiculous because there's this like through line for the show of us building a greenhouse.
Yeah.
We built it in 2 days. They're like, it took 6 weeks. It did it in 2 days. And it's fine, they really milked that one for what it was worth. They didn't have other projects to follow. Yes, go ahead.
So I totally think you're underselling all the wonderful things that you do at the Courageous Cooking School. So wouldn't it be nice to share what people do when they come visit you?
You think I'm underselling?
I do.
Okay. So the Courageous Cooking School is kind of a way that we like to approach how do you get back to basics and kind of throw out what you know. So there is this problem with recipes. And I try to avoid them as much as possible, but there are some things you just can't avoid, like medium high. That is parlance, that's expected. But what the heck does medium high mean? Somewhere between medium and high on your dial? Which burner? Is it gas? Is it induction? I will tell you, I have an electric top, and I don't have a medium high. I have a 1 point, a 2, a 2 point, all the way up to 8, which means I have 17 settings. They go up actually to 9. So like, yes, there's like 16 or 17 settings. Where's medium high on that? Oh, I don't know. 6 point? No, that's not even really simmering. 7 point? 8 point, you're burned. So like, we've got some problems, right? And I avoided as much as possible when I was writing, but there's some things that we've just kind of accepted as true. But one of the other things we've accepted as true is when someone says it is true, it is now fact. And the amount of times I had to correct people who were editing my book, who like, I had this editor come in and like add all of these random facts about French cuisine into my book. They aren't true. He's like, well, they're in like 30 books. And I was like, that's because someone wrote it once and everyone's decided it's fact. And now it's just been passed as fact. But no, the word galette does not mean windmill. It doesn't. Galette means flat pancake. So it is a flat pie, right? So that's where it comes from. But there's all these like parlances that we've just accepted as fact. And I think this really, really, really hope they let me write a second book. Maybe not because influencer culture, but that is what it is. And I would like to call it Mostly Not French, and talk about how we have this American imagination around what French food is like. It is hot, it is fancy, it is full of life. It is full of nothing. It is full of butter and cream and delicateness and no color. And good God, when you're in culinary school, if you get any brown on your onions, right? And oh, you put in 2 cloves of garlic? Are you insane? Well, I would have put in 6, but I knew you'd complain, sir. Chef, as the case may be, right? So the Courageous Cooking School is all about getting back to like how do people actually cook and how have they cooked for eons and how do we get back to that and how do we get these like really solid basics so that we can then move on. I think there's this belief that we just become intuitive cooks by like this. I can cook, right? And I was in an interview lately and I talk about intuition in the book a lot. I think I was at a different place 4 years ago when I was writing that section. And what I've realized is that being a skill-forward cook is more important than being intuitive. Because you can't build intuition if you don't have the skill set. So it's like, how do we get these really core base skills where there's lots of really intense deliciousness packed into those bases? How do you learn how to play the spices? It makes food a lot more interesting. And we always say just because something's cultural doesn't make it correct, but it does make it culturally correct. And cultural correctness around cuisine is based off of geography, right? And feelings and religion and the food system. And then the food system is impacted by our cookbooks. The reason why the American food system is the way that it is because of our obsession with the recipes, not the other way around, right? So the Courageous Cooking School, we're really looking at like, how do you take these building blocks? How do you just go to the farmer's market and go, ah, this beautiful tomato, rather than going, that's nice, what am I gonna do with it? Putting it down and walking away, because that's what most people do, including my mother. Bye, Mom. She's like, when we go to the farmer's market, she goes, what are you gonna do with that tomato? It's a tomato. It can be lots of things. It can be a sauce, it can be a salad, it can be baked into something. I can grill it, I can steam it. There's thousands of things I can do to this tomato. I can cook it, cut it, look at it funny. You can just stare at me while I stare at it. All of these things are possible with the tomato. And so for us, for Kendall and I, so I kind of built the method and then Kendall kind of has come on and become the lead instructor. She's an incredible instructor and I'm very, very grateful to have her in my life. And she is currently in France doing all of the stuff because I don't actually teach that much at school. You know, I'm like the dean. I'm the weird philosopher. I'm the one who sits and reads a lot of books and like learns a lot about theory and then in my brain and then spits it back out and like helps her become a better instructor. I think there's this belief, we have a lot of people who are like sent really nasty, angry emails. Makenna, you're not going to be here. I spent all this money to learn from you. And I was like, well, you would be disappointed because even when I'm in town, I usually see you once or twice, max, for like a hug and a photo op and maybe an omelet lesson if I'm like feeling up to it that week. So for me, the Courageous Cooking School is about getting back to really solid basics and kind of trying to like dump these things that have been forced upon us through books because books are repetitive. You know, that there is like the perfect stock recipe in many cookbooks. If it doesn't say use scraps, I'm immediately like, what are you doing? And there's a cookbook author I love, Julie, I will not name names. She knows who she is and she knows my opinion on it, but I don't need to call her out because she is a great cookbook author. She worked for one of those big food magazines for a long time and her stock recipe has become one of the most famous stock recipes. But like, it must be with clean, fresh ingredients. And everything must be brand new. And I'm like, no. So that's a lot about what we kind of do at the school. And we've broken it down and like, how do we talk about it? And I have magnets, all of you can have one. I brought them. And we teach online now and it's free to join. It's called Recipe Kick. It's the idea to be your sidekick to recipes and to kick them to the curb. But we teach by this pyramid. I'm trying to find a better name for it. Let's just say that Tasty Triangle will not be winning. That was one of the suggestions from one of my employees. And I was like, that is not a good idea. It's a very different cooking school. And then someone went as far as to say we could pleasure our palate as a Tasty Triangle. And I was like, you're all fired. I'm not old enough to be sitting in front of that conversation. But our whole kind of philosophy is if you can figure out the foundation is both the key ingredient and the end result. Sheet pan, bake, casserole, stew. And oftentimes the foundational ingredient dictates the end foundation. You're not going to take stew beef and make a sheet pan. God, I hope not, right? It's called stew beef for a reason. It is for stews. And we kind of then layer from there and teach you how to do that through various incarnations. We do it through This freaks people out. I'm like, pick 3 random spices. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, each of you, and we usually have 5 to 7 clients. And so then we have like sometimes as many as 21 on the table. I'm like, what are we gonna do with this? I was like, oh, it's going in dinner. They're like, what? I was like, how? I don't know yet. This is my first rodeo with these 21 spices too, because we never had the same exact group. Obviously, that would never happen. There's too many choices. We have like 100 spices. So that's how we teach, and we teach it for free on Recipe Kick. So I have these for you. Good magnets to your fridge. There's also a really good way to walk through cookbooks. It's like, oh, open a recipe, pop open your book for me, ma'am. Find one, find a recipe. Not stock, that doesn't count. Keep going. Broth and stock do not count. Perfect, ratatouille galette. So my base is going to be ratatouille. Ratatouille has the same 3 ingredients and a galette, which means that's going to be an end result, which means I need a pastry crust. I need the things that go in ratatouille. Now what? Okay, how do I make that more delicious? Well, I maybe want a little contrasting creamy cheesy thing. So maybe it's mascarpone. I think in this recipe it's mascarpone cheese. I was just at my first signing and someone's like, I really love your zucchini soup recipe. And I said, I have a zucchini soup. I finished editing this. The last time I saw it was 6 months ago. So obviously, and I've already written 2 other books that are like ready to go. So my memory on this one was thin. So it's about how we find like a nice complement to the brightness of the ratatouille and the sharpness and the acidity of the tomatoes. Well, a creamy cheese is going to counteract that. And then we figure out, oh, let's go kind of in this one. I went more classic on the spice profile. So, and then there's garnish and all of that. But that's how we teach. Is that better? Maybe it's my people who know me. Be like, hey. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What inspired your love or your passion for cooking?
It's a very good question. So Veronique, my exchange mother, she was a pharmacist, and she came home every day and cooked lunch and came home every day and cooked dinner.
Wow.
And she did it fast. And it was always fresh. And I was always baffled by it. My mother cooked dinner for me most nights too. It's not like I was in a household devoid of home cooked meals. But the way that she did it was so effortless, and there was almost never a book. My mother is an obsessive recipe card reader. She has her like favorite recipe cards in a box still to this day. She's made the soup 300 times, and she's like, teaspoon of time. And that's just how her brain works, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I do think it takes more time than it needs to. I think when you're planning for recipes, and as someone who, has spent a lot of time in philosophy and working in academia, and I'm always kind of thinking about like, how do we shift labor? It's like, especially the labor of cooking, because there's only 2 choices. You cook for yourself or someone cooks for you. And usually when someone cooks for you, they're not making much money. And so I always think it's good to know how to cook, both so that you have empathy for people who cook for you, also to save yourself a little bit of money, and to remind people that like, hey, we can do this. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle of humanity, right? When we started cooking, our brains got bigger because we could get better nutritional density, right? That was super important. So Veronique really did it, and also Being at Smith did it. I had this like really lucky break one year, and it was like the second year that Hampshire College, one of the colleges near Smith, was doing a CSA share, community sustained agriculture, long before it was cool and everywhere. And it was $200 for 12 weeks. And college student Makenna was like, I can afford $200. Had a good summer job this summer. I was a well-paid intern, oxymoron of sorts, but I actually was. I made $10 an hour back then. I felt like early 2000s as an intern. And I didn't have access to recipes because this was back in the day when we still had flip phones. I was saying that to my professor too, like, do you realize I was in classes before we had iPhones? And he's like, whoa, that's wild. When did that change? I said, year I graduated, we got them that fall. He's like, things changed after that. I was like, I bet. But this was before food blogs were a thing. I think the only one that was popular at the time was Julie and Julia, like when she was cooking through the cookbooks, but she wasn't writing the recipes on there. She was just she was reflecting on the recipes, and Smitten Kitchen. And she was kind of the first, right? The vagabond, the food blogger. And so being able to cook from recipes was really challenging because Bon Appetit kept them behind in magazines. Cookbooks were expensive for a college student. And I was dealing with ingredients I had never seen before. mean, I don't remember, 20 years ago, not many of us were like, oh, kohlrabi. Like, we have a lot more access to different products now. And so I fell in love with these ingredients, and the way I did it is I would, thank God there was still Google, right? But Google wasn't as efficient as it is now. Purple nubbly vegetable with greens. Turnip? Not a turnip, I know what a turnip is. Cut it open. That tastes like broccoli. Kohlrabi, ding, got it. Now what the heck do I do with kohlrabi? Well, you cut it, you taste it. Oh, it tastes good raw. Throw a little dressing on it, have a little salad. And, you know, I fell in love with heirloom tomatoes. They had all you could pick heirloom tomatoes. And they had 32 varieties. In Colorado, Makenna, who had only ever seen like a hothouse mealy tomato other than living in France, I was like, green zebra, my savior. So that's how. And that was, I really didn't have a choice. And I had to start inviting friends over because I had 20 to 30 pounds of produce a week. And I was raised in a family like probably most of you going, you don't waste food. Wasting food is bad. There are kids dying of starvation in Somalia or wherever, China, Asia, wherever it was at the time, right? And so I got really used to using it, and I would invite friends over, and like, you couldn't Google a recipe for potato leek soup. Now you can, there's thousands of them. That's how. Yes.
When you first bought the house, did you make a lot of changes to it?
Absolutely not. I did not touch it. I left it like a museum, and then I slowly started making small changes, but we haven't made very many changes. We've changed some of the wall paint colors. We've repainted, we have to repaint every 2 to 3 years just because of traffic. The house has changed over the years. Luke Barr, who wrote Providence 1970, which is a historical fiction account of 69 into 70 and kind of based off of letters of the goings on at La Peach. And he stayed in the house and wrote this beautiful piece. If you look up Luke Barr, Julia Child's house in France, there's this beautiful piece he wrote right around the time of the book. And he talks about how the house has evolved. And the house was very much that baby blue. And the green tile is original, despite what Karen, literally her name's Karen, I'm not making a joke, on Amazon says, or she wrote this long negative review on my show. That literally spans, how dare they change her kitchen, unless this is just a small make-do kitchen. Karen, did you even watch the show? It's about her French house. Did you know that her actual kitchen is in the Smithsonian? And no, yes, the original green tile is that ugly, and yes, it's been there since she got there. I did not change it. So, yeah.
You never forget Karen.
But it's fine. If you go look up the reviews on Amazon, you can find her. And if you go look at the other things she's reviewed, she has impeccable taste in caftans. I'm kidding. 5 stars. The most beautiful caftan ever. Glad that works for you. Can't even be mad though. It's like, oh, okay, you're really angry at me. That's okay. You can be angry at me. I didn't do anything wrong about a house. And kept it the same. Other questions? Yes.
Is there a meal that just lives rent free in your head that you go back to that like that was the meal?
Weirdly, yes. But it's not going to be what you think it would be. I had deer in McLeodganj, India, after I broke my foot and I was on crutches. And the host that I was staying with made me like deer meat that she had hunted that day. And it was like one of the most delicious things I've ever had in my life.
Very cool.
There's a couple like Michelin starred places. Like I've had a lot of luck of going to a lot of really amazing Michelin starred restaurants, some of which are overblown and some of which are not. And I will tell you that Atelier Crème in San Francisco is not overblown. It was one of the best 4.5 hours of my life. But it was 4.5 hours of eating. Alinea was fun too. I had a lot of fun at Alinea in Chicago. In general, it's very funny. So one of the questions that I often get asked is like, how did you get into food? And it's like, well, I didn't come by it necessarily naturally because my father was a senior vice president of Taco Bell while I was growing up. He invented the fire sauce in the 7-layer burrito. So it was overtime, obviously. I still do like Taco Bell once every trip in the United States. I took a robot car in LA to Taco Bell, one of those driverless cars called Waymo. It's like a Google company. And I like literally get in a robot car and he takes the thing takes me to Taco Bell and I eat my crunch wrap and I get back in another robot car and I was like, this is weird. I just ate a crunch wrap by way of robot. Okay, here we are. Future. Other questions?
Find sourcing food in France different from sourcing food in the US.
It's not as different as people claim it to be. Now, the difference is that it is not as prevalent here or as seasonal in every grocery store. So in France, pretty much every grocery store is seasonal. There are very few that have kind of year-round food systems. There are a couple, and they're very rare. But so here you can still get that if you spend time at farmers markets, if you spend time shopping seasonally and knowing like when you go into Whole Foods, sometimes it is seasonal and sometimes it's not, and kind of being aware of that. I will say in general, the food is cheaper and of higher quality, and it just doesn't travel as far, right? That's the big thing, is that the food is not traveling as far. But also we make a very conscious effort to shop hyper local. That's just kind of like how we live our life, right? But I would say that you can do that here. It's a little bit more expensive and requires a little bit more work. And because where I live is so less driven by seasons, which is one of the reasons why the cookbook is split into seasons, split into warmer weather and cooler weather. So this will wet your whistle when it's cool out, and this is better for when it's warm out. That's really more about like, so obviously there's things that won't fall into the season of Connecticut, that won't fall into the season of California, right? Because I live in a pretty seasonless place. There's hot as hell and good luck. There's two types of weather. And hot as hell runs from July to August, sometimes into June, sometimes into September. And the rest of the year, it's like you have no idea if it'll be 75 degrees or raining, and it might even snow. It's very rare, but it does happen. And it's sometimes in like April. When that happens, it's not very much fun. Everybody just panics. What? Snow? It's been 7 years. Sometimes snows on the beach in Canada, but not very often. That's the big difference. I mean, I spend a lot more time going to the grocery store than I did when I lived in the States. In the States, I would shop once a week. I'm shopping like 4 or 5 times a week in France. And I have a pretty decent sized fridge, but that's just like kind of the MO things. They're not gassed, so they don't keep as long. They're not in packaging. Like my greens don't keep because they weren't like CO2'd into the package, and so they don't have that kind of like protective thing that lets them stay longer. But they're literally like wet in a bin. I'm sticking them in a bag, and they last for like 2 or 3 days. So it's just this. It's more work, but it's possible to replicate here. I'm always surprised when I come back to the States because I hear all this horror story, and I'm like, well, yes, if you go to the Kroger all the time, you're right, your produce is going to be pretty bad. But if you're going to farmers markets or you're going to like a Whole Foods and focusing on what's more seasonal, or like a co-op, you can replicate. It's just about 25%, 30% more expensive here. Except for eggs, it's like 20 times the price now. I saw $7 a dozen driving through like the backwoods. I was like, oh, isn't that nice? Like the good old days.
The eggs themselves are so much better in France.
They are, but again, if you get farm eggs here, they're just as good. So there's a lot of things about like the French that's why I want to write this book, about the imagination we have of how great France is. But ultimately, there are bad eggs in France. There are good eggs in France. There's factory farmed meat in France, and there's local meat in France. There's kind of like, it still exists in both places. It's just a little easier because there still is the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker in towns. As opposed to us, where like every once in a while a bougie butcher comes into town, and usually they don't last that long because it's really expensive. And you know, some things are actually better, but they're not better for the reasons you think they are. Every once in a while someone will come and be like, well, the butter is so much better in France. I'm like, yes, it is. Like, it's because of their exceptional cows. And I was like, no, it's not. It's actually has to do with refrigeration. In the United States, to make butter at scale, we require refrigeration the minute the milk leaves the udder. So the line is refrigerated. There's no time to do anything. And in France, you fill the tank, let it come to room temperature, and then turn on refrigeration. So it has about an 8-hour ferment. And that 8-hour ferment changes the flavor of the butter. It's a little bit of acid in your life. It's not actually because of exceptional French cows.
I just read an article that Jacques Pepin loves Land O'Lakes.
Land O'Lakes is a great butter. I mean, it just doesn't have the tang. Some people don't actually prefer it right? Like some people, and it's so funny because one of my editors was like, oh, how are we ever going to be able to use this cookbook in the United States? You must tell them you're using French butter. I was like, it'll still work. Well, it's just these, and she also said exceptional cows. And I was like, who is writing about French exceptional cows? I am so curious, like what food writer has been writing about the exceptionalism of French cows? How many French cookbooks is it in? The exceptional cows produce exceptional butter. They're cows. I mean, but the French like to think everything's exceptional. And everything they do is exceptional. Which is okay. A lot of things they do exceptional.
Speaking of the French, have the locals embraced your school?
Weirdly enough, not just our school, our restaurant. This is a great story because I do not get nervous speaking in English. I get very nervous speaking in French, especially in front of a board who's deciding whether they're going to fund my restaurant. So let me tell you a little story. Kendall and I go to this meeting. I get red when I get excited, but when I get nervous, I get redder. So I'm red right now. I'm progressively getting redder and redder, and her pit stains are getting wetter and wetter, and we're just like, and we left and we thought they hated us. They looked through my book and they're like, oh, we got a call 5 minutes later. Hi, we're going to offer you this grant and this massive, almost no interest bank loan. We are thrilled that you're bringing a 3-person American owned restaurant to our city. And this is the first time in the history of running this program that we were unanimously yes. And within 30 seconds.
Wow.
And I went, this is. But yes, they have. And you know, honestly, I've been surprised because they're not. But here's the other thing. I think a lot of people think the French don't like Americans. They like Americans just fine. We just happen to be exceptionally rude in their mind. But it's a very minor nuance. So when I walk into RJ Julia bookstore, I expect a bookseller to say, good afternoon. In France, no. You put a foot nigh, not even on the floor, through the threshold. Thou must say bonjour before you get in the door. So if you have not, and that is in a room full of people. So if I'm in a room full of people and I walk in right now, I would have to say bonjour loud enough that everyone could hear me. And if I don't do that, I am rude. Now that is exactly. Can you imagine if I walked into RJ Julia and went, hello, how are you today? But that's what you're expected to do. So this one little nuance makes people rude to us because we've already been exceptionally rude to them. But of course, like, it's a really small thing, but really massive impact. So in general, the French are just as obsessed with us. So we have French restaurant after French restaurant. One of their most popular chains restaurant is called Memphis Coffee. Memphis Coffee looks like Johnny Rockets got thrown up on with 20 times the memorabilia and 20 times the Americana. And they just play like random clip after random clip. And not even like whole clips with no sound of random, very American programming, but a dance scene from West Side Story. John Wayne. We're like only like 2 seconds. Walking into a room. West Side Story. Wicked. I mean, it's just like American after American after American, no sound. And then there's just like all of these posters of Marilyn Monroe and Elvis, and none of it matches. So they are just as obsessed with us as we are with them. So they have this imagination of us too. And they love to come to the US. You just don't notice them because they don't talk to you much. Because they don't speak that good of English, and so they don't, but they're here, they're tourists, they exist, they're just like very quiet and they keep to themselves. Rather than us, who are like, I love French, tell me, talk to me, French people, give me your French heads. Which is like how Americans are, because melting pot culture. France is not a melting pot. It doesn't want to be, but now it's realizing it kind of has to be to survive, especially in a town like Gross. Because Gross has always kind of been an immigrant population.
Did you say what your restaurant is named?
Well, detour. Yeah, so in French, detour. We needed a word that worked in English and in French. And we also needed it to mean something. So at the end of a roundabout, it's a detour in our life. This was not on the agenda, my friends. It wasn't like Kendall and I were like, let's open a restaurant. I was like, someday, let's think about maybe opening a restaurant. And economist Makenna was like, we'd lived in Gross for about 6 months. I was like, you know, Gross is really going to be SOL. Because it has none of the things that make a community function. This is kind of a universal truth. every community needs a neighborhood restaurant. What do I mean by neighborhood restaurant? It's a type of place you can afford to eat in multiple times a week. It's diverse enough that you could, but you might not. But like, it needs to kind of fit that bill. And when the community doesn't have a neighborhood restaurant that fits that bill, that's open from like 11 to 11-ish, you know, lunch and dinner typically. In France, it's not usually in the afternoon, but like lunch and dinner 6 days a week, year round. Communities don't work. Because there's nowhere for people to gather. And it's more important in French economic development than US, but it's it's required in every community. This is required not just in Western communities. This is true kind of around the world. The cornerstone, it just might look different. It might not be a building, it might not, but there needs to be a place to gather to eat. That's not a house, right? And I noticed it was missing, and I said to Kendall, well, if we really want Gross to thrive, and a neighborhood restaurant needs to come in. She's like, yeah, not us. The next day I saw for sale. I went, for sale, Kendall, and she's like, no. I'm like, I'm gonna set an appointment and look at it. It's a fact finding mission. And I went and fact found and went, look good. And I called her, she came over and she went, oh, we're opening a restaurant. It's not a huge kitchen. I mean, it's like exceptionally large for a French kitchen. Yeah, August 1st. I have better ideas. Like buying Julia's house, that was a better idea. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, well, not Airbnb, but yes. So yeah, the cooking school is still there. It's in its last couple seasons, like last few weeks, really. We're running through the fall and then we're gonna pause it. So you'll still be able to do the Courageous Cooking School in a buyout. But because we're focused on Recipe Kick doing these other things, we found a space in Gross to open like a shop, cooking school, wine import export situation. And I got offered the funding yesterday and I'm like sitting on it. So I don't really know. I'm really focused on the restaurant right now. But ultimately, like running the Courageous Cooking School has been great, but there's only so many years you can kind of like be living in someone else's shadow. Especially when you have a personality like mine. It's like being under someone's very large thumb. And just going like, but I've loved every minute of it. I'm ready for a change. So 10 years is a long time.
Are you selling it or?
No.
You live there.
No, I don't live there.
It's just the.
No, I lived there for a long time. But I moved out when I had my kiddo. It was like getting people knocking on my door at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm just drunk and out of wine. Do you happen to have more? Not my problem. We didn't buy enough at Super U. I'm sleeping. So I didn't want to have my kiddo in a situation like that. So yeah, I'm not selling. I mean, maybe someday. I'm never gonna say never, but like
I really like it. I've done a lot of work maintaining it, and I'm not ready to let it go yet.
I'm just ready for a change in like kind of my daily life.
So what are you gonna do with it?
But just rent it.
Oh.
So it'll be available to rent, and then we'll still run the Courageous Cooking School on a buyout basis. One of the problems we have with the Courageous Cooking School is, you know, in hospitality, you have 25 to 30% attrition, even though we have a very strict no cancellation policy. People still cancel and just go, huh, well, my money's gone. When that happens, we have to fill the spots because two people is not enough to run it. You must have 4, ideally 5 or 6. Because the way it works, since we're using like collective knowledge, it's like being in a seminar, a philosophy seminar, where only one person has done the reading. And you're talking about Hume. You're the only one who's done the reading, and everybody else is just like, yeah, you keep talking. It just doesn't work. And so you have to kind of get to this quorum numbers. And so we end up with like, you know, people who just pay the deposits and walk and all of that. And we have to find people to fill the spots. And we have to either sell it really hard or like invite clients who have been and invite them back to be a plant and pretend like, because it has to be full. So that's just a challenge that like I don't want to navigate anymore. And also the navigation, the challenge, I have a few people who've been there. Sometimes the groups are great and sometimes they are not. And sometimes right now I have a very challenging group. I'm getting all the Slack messages where there's some big political problems amongst them. They're like fighting and getting drunk and like not physically fighting, but like there's been words and I'm like, pause. I'm really glad we're pausing.
But when the group works, it's wonderful.
But that's why we're gonna keep doing it. And hopefully the new space, it's a slightly larger group. It's not significant. It's like 10 people instead of 6. Just gives us a little bit more wiggle room and a little bit more like. So if we have attrition, it's not a big deal. Because our limit is the size of the kitchen. The kitchen It's very small. And at maximum 7 guests and an instructor and a dishwasher. And then if you do that and add 3 cameras, it's tight. And so that's our limitation, right? We can always like extend the property. There's all sorts of things we could do. But ultimately, like, and it's been great. And we'll keep doing it in these kind of buyout ways so that you are responsible for bringing the people. Not me. It's not my job to sell it out. It is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. This was wonderful. We're gonna move on to the signing portion, so we're gonna have Makenna go out front. And if you bought a book, we'll have her personalize it. If you wanna buy a book, there's still some books here and at the other register. Okay, thank you all for being here.